The National Guard, Donald Trump's attempted deployment of it, federalization of it, takeover of state militia in order to violate state sovereignty in blue states, back in the news. Because we're waiting on the United States Supreme Court to make its ruling. We've been waiting now over 10 days as to whether Donald Trump has the right to take over in first instance a state militia, or whether he has to go through the process of using his federal armed forces, his federal security forces, his federal officers, and even local law enforcement. And only if that all fails in his execution of the immigration law does he need the backup of the militia. Supreme Court's about to rule on that. They've got the full briefing. We've been waiting for their ruling now. I'm sure that dissents and concurrences are being written as we speak. But ground zero for this fight is in Illinois. And it's embodied by two different judges, Judge Perry and Judge Ellis. Judge Perry, who issued the initial preliminary injunction to stop the takeover of the National Guard based on the facts on the ground, and Judge Ellis, who entered a 250-page plus order concerning her injunction to stop the attacks on First Amendment protesters, members of the clergy, veterans, students, members of the media on the streets of Illinois. Illinois is the crucible for this particular issue. And I had the ability to brief the Attorney General for the state of Illinois, Kwame Raoul, in a special exclusive briefing. And we talked about things like the opposition to the Department of Justice and the rogue Trump administration and the lawless Trump administration, and Illinois being at the centerpiece of this National Guard issue. It's much greater than just Illinois. It goes beyond that. It goes to limiting and clipping the wings of an out-of-control Donald Trump. And here's my exclusive Legal AF interview with Attorney General Kwame Raoul. Welcome to a special edition of Legal AF. I have the great honor and privilege to talk to attorneys general around the country, particularly Democratic ones, about their fight against the Trump administration. And now I've got the pleasure to be joined by Attorney General Kwame Raoul of Illinois. Attorney General, welcome to Legal AF.
Thanks for having me.
Real pleasure. And Illinois, of course, is on everybody's minds because of the attempted rollout of the National Guard, the deployment and the federalization of the state militia by Donald Trump. There's cases that are now pending all the way up to the United States Supreme Court. We've got a couple of decisions coming from your federal judges, Judge Perry and Judge Ellis. Talk to our audience about the role of the Attorney General and your office in these cases, and then we can kind of advance where we think we're going to be as we wait patiently, I guess, for the Supreme Court to make a ruling about whether Donald Trump has the ability, based on the facts on the ground, to deploy the state militia or not.
Yeah. Just as recent as a couple of days ago, we did a supplemental filing before the Supreme Court, which asked, based on our initial filings, for definition of what regular forces means. And so we did that filing, and so we're waiting at any time for the Supreme Court to come down. What's interesting about the case, both before Judge Perry as well as before the court, is the posture of the federal government on it. And, Judge Perry entered a temporary restraining order after arguments, a hearing that she held where the declarations that the federal government filed were being proven untrue in real time.
Right, we call that a lie. They lied in court.
Several lies that I'd love to point out. Yeah. Right? One, they said that there was a request for National Guard troops to protect the federal court building. And the chief judge of the Northern District came out the day of our hearing and said there was no such request. Two, they said the gentleman at the ICE facility in Broadview, Illinois, had said things were so unruly and out of control there. We had an email from that exact gentleman in the declaration to the state police, thanking the state police for keeping things in order.
No need for the state militia. The local police can take care of it.
Exactly. And then finally, they named specific individuals who they said were being violent towards ICE agents. And those individuals, grand juries declined to indict those individuals. In real time, we got a note from one of my staffers who got a text while we were during the hearing that the grand jury had declined on a third one. They had declined on two previous ones. The interesting thing about Judge Perry's order, I really
were you there when she read it aloud, or the parts of it?
Yeah,
in the courtroom.
Yeah,
and is she the judge that quoted the great poem by Carl Sandburg, Chicago?
Well, she what she referenced was Alexander Hamilton in Federalist 29. Mm-hmm. And she said that Hamilton was arguing for deference to the federal government in terms of control of the militia. And there were those who were arguing that, they might send one state's militia into another state. And Hamilton was saying, it'd be outrageous it'd be unthinkable that there'd be a president that would send, the militia of one state into another. And that's where we've gotten to with this administration, the things that would be too unbelievable for even a fictional movie are coming.
And you were a state prosecutor. You were a Cook County prosecutor at one point in your career. Did you ever think we'd reach a point where a federal judge, in this case Judge Ellis, would have to enter an order to stop the clergy, First Amendment protesters, members of the media, and veterans from being beaten or having tear gas or pepper balls or gang tackled by federal security officers?
It would be unthinkable. Right. And so, when we lay down the laws that are to govern our law enforcement and government at large, we think that even though there may be differences in ideology, there wouldn't be the types of abuse of power that we've seen under this administration. And the National Guard case is a critical one because the federal government's argument is notwithstanding the fact that their declarations, their facts that they have alleged were not true. Yeah. They're saying that doesn't matter, that ultimate deference should be given to the president, and the president can basically determine his own facts and justify militarizing our cities. That's what's before the Supreme Court right now.
Well, you look at the argument that they have just raised. For our audience, the theory is that only if, after using quote unquote regular forces, which I agree with you are the Army, federal forces, only if that doesn't work, and I think you maybe even add in local law enforcement, do you get to then call for backup and bring in the state militia, violate state sovereignty, and tap them. And yet they argued that, I couldn't believe the argument that the Solicitor General raised, which is a new definition of regular forces that I've never seen in the history of surrounding, going back to the 1790s and the Militia Act. They just created a new definition of what regular forces are.
They're really searching. And it's inconsistent with their posture of the past of having a real conservative, plain language interpretations of our laws and languages and within.
There's other cases, of course, that as part of this group of attorneys general that you're out in front on, and I want to talk about a couple that I think are near and dear to your heart. One of them is the birthright citizenship, and the other would be trying to protect the Venezuelan and Haitian community with and all Americans with the temporary protective status lawsuits that you're also leading on. Right.
I'm a child of Haitian immigrants who came here in the late 50s and made a good life for me and my sisters and made huge contributions to Chicago. My father was a physician, community physician, served the south side of Chicago for 30 years. And like many communities, immigrants are making those types of contributions. And in some cases, after leaving conditions in their home countries that causes them to need to leave and to need temporary protective status. And Haitians have enjoyed TPS. And this abrupt notion of terminating that TPS status is unjust and we think unlawful based on the history of the use of TPS status. With regards to birthright citizenship, that case is important to me for two reasons. One, my mom was not yet naturalized at the time that I was born. But more important than even my personal connection to birthright citizenship is the language of the 14th Amendment is so plain that if you're born in this country and subject to the laws thereof, you are a citizen. And those who are—
the history of it, where it came from, with our Reconstruction period, post-Civil
Absolutely.
War for Black Americans.
Exactly. But it's interesting because, the president has tried to use that to say, well, it shouldn't be— it
only applies to former slaves?
Yeah, exactly. It shouldn't have this broader application. But those who have supported him in that argument historically has said we should just look at the plain language in the Constitution. So the plain language of the 14th Amendment is that if you're born here and subject to its laws, you are a citizen. And it's remarkable to me how so many are flipping their philosophy as to how to read the Constitution just to serve the means of this president.
I mean, if the far right of the Supreme Court just applies their own, whether you call it originalism or textualism, or as you said, just read the language of the statute, I don't know how they come out with any other conclusion that you can't, by executive order, rip the beating heart of birthright citizenship out of the Constitution.
Yeah, and that's right. And we've seen it, with regards to the 10th Amendment as well, right? We were sued because of our Trust Act, a sort of sanctuary state policy, and we were sued a couple of times, and we were the first state sued by the Department of Justice with regards to.
Well, let's talk about that for our audience, because sometimes we lapse into shorthand. They might not know what we're talking about. Is that your version, your state's version of sanctuary cities or sanctuary state?
Yeah, it in essence says that local and state law enforcement resources shall not be used for civil and immigration and enforcement.
Right, they won't impede it, but they're not going to help with it either.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the Department of Justice sued us after the initial Bove memo that threatened state officials and anybody.
Our Third Circuit Court of Appeal Judge Bove. Yeah.
And so we had previously litigated based on a suit from a local sheriff. I can't, I would never think that I would be quoting Justice Scalia as much as we have had to of late to say that the anti-commandeering doctrine that grows out of the 10th Amendment does not allow for the federal government to commandeer state and local forces to do what is the federal government's job. And so again, those who have historically argued for a balance in federalism,
right, and states' rights,
and states' rights are flipping the script and for this administration.
When you got into being in this gig to be the Attorney General, did you ever think you'd have to be defending federalism and the 10th Amendment against the president?
I did not, and it's interesting because I came in during Trump 1.0, and I didn't imagine then that that president would go to these extremes. We came in, and when I came in 2019, we had a great collaboration, and I've maintained it on the local level with the arms of the Department of Justice, with FBI, DEA, ATF. We have a tremendous partnership with ATF in fighting crime, which is the interesting thing about the notion of the president wanting to send in the National Guard, and he articulates that it's about crime, while in the court proceedings they say it's about protecting buildings and protecting
right.
the
If he
ICE
wanted
agents.
to really support local law enforcement, there's other ways to do that, including giving you more funding and more programs and more cooperation.
And not diverting
Yeah.
FBI agents and ATF agents to do civil immigration work, because again, we've had great partnership with those agents at fighting crime.
Yeah.
And so I don't oppose the president saying that he wants to help fight crime in Chicago, but do it the right way.
Yeah.
Do it with people who are trained at fighting crime.
As we end here, what's the biggest difference between Trump 1 and Trump 2 from your vantage point as an attorney general with the Department of Justice? And I'll say it, the most corrupt Department of Justice that we've ever had. I'm not maligning those career prosecutors that remain in there and maybe are forming part of a resistance. I'm talking about leadership and how it approaches its cases. How has that changed your job?
Yeah, so in Trump's first administration, while I may have disagreed with Jeff Sessions and Bill Barr plenty of times, they still maintain a level of independence from the president that does not exist right now whatsoever, and it's frightening, because the destruction of the different agencies within the Department of Justice, the various U.S. attorneys' offices, the FBI, going after FBI agents if they were at all involved with investigating January 6th, it really guts an important arm of law enforcement, of national security, to where whoever might succeed this administration has to just rebuild.
There's a rebuild.
And we don't realize the extent to which this has a negative impact on crime fighting, on fighting political corruption, on fighting against ransomware. You know, my office was a victim of a ransomware attack a few years ago, and the FBI was a tremendous asset at helping us deal with it. We're gutting these institutions and institutional sort of knowledge within, and replacing it with people who just want to follow orders from the president.
And one thing, lastly, one thing that's a concern of our audience is voting and getting ready for, we just had a tremendous election night in America a couple of weeks ago, but they're worried about the midterms and what's going to happen with this weaponized Department of Justice. There's no civil rights division. There's no public integrity unit. What are you doing along with the other attorneys generals to make sure that people have confidence that when they vote, their vote will count and they won't be intimidated? Yeah,
fortunately in Illinois, and I take credit for it, I served in the General Assembly in the Illinois Senate for 14 years, and I was a chief sponsor of a constitutional amendment that protects voting rights within the state of Illinois, as well as an Illinois Voting Rights Act, which goes a little bit beyond the Federal Voting Rights Act at protecting voting rights in the redistricting process. And so we've got protections at the state level, and we encourage optimal levels of voting. We're not trying to discourage voting by saying, oh, if you, for mail-in voting, for instance, if you mail in your vote and it doesn't get in by election day, that you're not going to count it. By trying to shorten the voting period, or where some states say you can't even give somebody a bottle of water if they're in a long line trying to vote. No, we try to encourage optimum participation in voting. That's a true democratic process that our country is based on.
Yeah, I think it's one of the reasons they didn't send any election observers into Illinois. I think they focused on some other states, but I'm so glad we had an opportunity to brief our audience about things that are going on in your great state of Illinois. Attorney General Kwame Raoul here on Legal AF.
Thank you.
Real pleasure. Thanks for being here on Legal AF. we've got the street credibility because of you to bring in exclusive interviews. I just interviewed 11 Democratic attorneys general all together to brief our audience exclusively on issues that matter to you, from voting rights to the 40 or more lawsuits that are against the Trump administration led by the attorneys general, to their particularized issues as the people's attorney in each of their states. We get judges, we get the American Civil Liberties Union, we get the Democracy Forward, we get representatives of the House to come talk to you exclusively here on Legal AF. We are the home of all things law and politics. Take a minute, hit the free subscribe button, and help us continue to grow what we're doing here together. So until my next report, I'm Michael Popok. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.